Hi, I'm Judy, and I am an alcoholic. By the grace of God and the fellowship of this program, I've not had any alcohol or other fun, legal or illegal, mood-altering materials since April the 10th, 1980. Around April the 10th, 1980, I sent my first husband, who had a drinking problem, to Mandan, North Dakota for treatment because he needed fixing. I went up with his mother for his family week, assuming that nobody would know for sure why he was there, and also you could be hunting if you're in North Dakota. And on Monday, we were to tell why we're there, who our patient is, and what we want to get out of the week. And it was to begin at 9 o'clock. At 9:20, the counselor showed up. When it was my turn to talk, I told her, I can get here from Oklahoma and be on time. If you can't get here, how are you going to fix him? Now, Tuesday, it accidentally slipped out that I had had a hit-and-run automobile accident and left the scene of that accident. And on Wednesday of that week, that counselor, she looked at me, she pointed at me, and she said, "You're an alcoholic." And I have rehearsed every single situation several ways in my entire life, except for that one. Now, it didn't seem too bad at the moment. Everybody there was running around saying, "Hi, I'm Susie. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm an alcoholic." I went to my first speaker meeting at that institution. And the man shared from the podium that he had had sex with a sheep. And I approached him afterward because he needed fixing. And I told him, listen, I can understand really having sex with a sheep. You know, my sex life was pretty far out there. But you should never mention something like that from the podium. And he said, "Honey, how long have you been here?" "About 2 weeks." And I said, "No, I've been here 4 weeks." Secrets keep us sick. What I learned in that treatment center, honesty, what I learned in that treatment center. At some point in time, they let us out of the nut house and we could go to town and go shopping. And I came home with 17 pairs of shoes. You would have thought that there was a fire. You would have thought that there was a tornado. They called my counselor who came in on the weekend, and she was way overreacting. She went through every single box of shoes and pulled all the paper out, and I said, "Do you think I'm stupid? I wouldn't try to smuggle drugs in here in a shoebox." And she said, "We'll talk to you on Monday." On Monday, she told me, "You're going to have to return those shoes." I said, "Wait a minute. I'm here for alcohol and drugs. I am not here for you to control what I spend." And she said, "Honey, We're like a pressure cooker. And we put a plug on the alcohol and drugs, and this over here is going to pop up. And then you put a plug on that, and this over here is going to pop up. And so we might as well take care of some of your other addictions right here. But what I'm most curious about is why 17? And I said, well, they were 2 for 1. And she said, well, even that would have been an even number. I said, yes, but that last pair just kind of jumped in there. And they sent a bloomin' committee with me to go back to town to return those shoes. And to tell the shoe store where I was in that town and why I was there. Now, standard treatment that's covered by insurance, I think, is 4 weeks back in the day. And I was there 7 weeks. That might tell you something. And I know that it's typical to go through a drunk-a-log, but I think you will catch the idea that I do qualify. I do qualify for this program. I can tell you right off the bat that I have a couple of gripes with regard to my higher power. One is ticks. You know, when I get up there, I'm going to ask him, why on earth did you create those? And the other major gripe that I have is self-examination and people overreacting. I understand that lack of power is our dilemma. And that's why I looked around at some point in my drinking career at who had the power. You know, and clearly it was the lawyers that were keeping the dealers out of jail. And it was the lawyers that were helping people with the rental problems. And it was the lawyers that were cashing in that money for that automobile accident. So I went to law school. I knew what it meant to not have enough power. The blessing today is that our daughter, our youngest child, is in law school, and she's doing it straight and sober, and she'll ask questions, and I'll say, well, you know, I don't remember that all that well. You know, it's kind of a foggy deal there. The other gripe that I have with my higher power is the legalization of marijuana after I got sober in our home state. Now that is really irritating. When I left that treatment center, they said, go to meetings, read the book, put a plug in the jug, get a sponsor. Ask for help in the morning, thank him at night. Go to meetings. I went to my first meeting, and I was parked there in my black Cadillac looking all spiffy, and somebody comes up and knocks on the window and says, are you here for AA? And I said, no, isn't this where the PTA meets? And she said, come on in when you get ready. Read the book. There were so many errors in that book. There were genetic errors in the book. There were misuses of words in the book. There were so many outdated things in that book. It was almost intolerable to someone of my stature. Ask for help in the morning. Thank him at night. Well, frankly, you know, I'm not too sure I believe in whatever it is. or that it's a him. So I can go as far as to ask for help and say thank you. Find a sponsor, somebody who has what you want. My first sponsor, well, let me first say I did not look like this when I came into the program. My first sponsor was blonde, blue-eyed, 5'3" or so, and a size 2. Now, if you don't know about women's sizes, that is tiny. And I'm sure I was a size 18 at the time. She had a husband. I did not. That first one, had to get rid of him. That whole relationship was based on sex, drugs, and rock and roll. She had 3 kids. She had a job. She had a 2-story house. But most of all, what cinched the deal was she had a Datsun blue 280ZX. That is not what they mean by find somebody who has what you want. My functional sponsor, a lady named Greta, now deceased, was so different from me. It was the moon and the sun. Greta lived on $4,000 a year. Needless to say, I did not. Greta was angry twice, once at the IRS and once at her toilet, the entire time I knew her and was sponsored by her, 18 years. Lunch, every Wednesday, Greta's house. I came with all the information about what was screwed up in my life, what the judges had done wrong, what the clients had done wrong, what every relationship that I had had done wrong, everything. But you have to walk through the yard with Greta. And she would say, look at the stem on those jonquils, and look at that yellow color. And oh, have you ever seen such a magnificent magnolia tree? And by the time it was appropriate to eat, I had forgotten what it was that I was going to tell her. Later, Greta lost her mind and couldn't remember diddly squat. And I thought, I can't have a person that can't remember what I tell her, sponsor me, And then God said, Greta lives in the moment. Why don't you try doing that? How do you stay sober? Well, in Oklahoma in the 1980s, you smoked a lot of cigarettes, Marlboros. You did coffee cups and ashtrays, and you went to every conference within 100 miles. To go to a conference, you had to have a huge thermos of black coffee and a carton of cigarettes. And I went to, I think, Happy, Texas, and there's a Methodist camp there. And, the ladies could not even wear shorts or sleeveless clothing. Serious place. My, how the Methodists have changed. Saturday morning, Greta took me on a walk, and we went up to a beautiful setting with a lake, and the sun was shining on the water and little tiny ripples. It made millions of diamonds on that lake. And this alcoholic had her first spiritual experience, seeing the beauty of God's nature and believing, because I chose to believe, that God created it all. And then I had a name. I had a name for my higher power. Before I could share all this with Greta, Greta stripped down naked and jumped in. And you know the deal is in this program, do what they did to get it. So there I was, skinny dipping in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I thought, this is going to be all right. It'll work out quite well. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Separate the men from the boys. Problem is, I got sober. I was a thief before I got sober. I got sober. I was still a thief. I was promiscuous before I got sober. I got sober, and Greta, 1 year, total abstinence. Don't look at them on TV. Don't date them. Don't sit next to them at AA meetings. Let me make it perfectly clear what the rules are. Best you not even think about them. 1 year, I go, Greta, the 1 year's over. And she said, some of us are sicker than others. I will be happy to let you know when your celibacy is over. 5 years later, Greta released me. And I ran right out and had an affair with a married minister. All of a sudden, this church that we're not going to mention is becoming prominent in my talk. Anyhow, it was a married Methodist minister. You know, and Greta watched it for a while because she had introduced us, right? I mean, sometimes I hear God talk and what I think He's saying ain't what He's saying. You know, and I thought the whole deal was divinely inspired. And Greta said, it's not. And she said, it's him or me. And, you know, and I was smart by then, and I picked him. Somehow, I got slapped in the face eventually. And when I did stop that relationship, I was allowed to go back to my sponsor. Some of us are sicker than others. You can either do what's suggested, or you can not. It's just a matter of time. The action of God is inevitable. What's variable is how long I fight it. I continued to skim off the top from my business partner, sober, and continued to find things. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. And if the item was lost, then it could be mine. Or if I needed it at that moment, it could be mine. My husband and I go to Joseph Harp Prison for AA meetings, and there's a basket where you take off your shoes to get checked out by them. And in that basket, there was a really, really nice big pen. And I picked it up, you know, and I slipped it in my pocket, you know, and my husband says, honey, you know, I don't want to come back here next week and make amends to the warden with you for stealing a pen. That's my preference. So I went into the AA meeting with a bunch of rapists and murderers and told them about my problem, you know, with thievery. They enjoyed it thoroughly. When I went to Happy, Texas, I went into the chapel, and there was stained glass, not as beautiful as this stained glass. And I was praying up a storm about remove all these character defects, man, because they are hard to deal with sober. And I was touched by the hand of God, and he removed, I know, my focal character defect was gluttony. And I knew he removed it. I wanted to eat an entire pizza and have the figure of Angelina Jolie. And it happened. And I went back into the lunchroom, and I ate my lunch, and I ate my sponsor's dessert, and I ate the ladies next to me dessert. And I never smoked another cigarette. And I complained to my sponsor about that. You know, I was praying for something else. And she said, maybe you didn't see the words, we're entirely ready to have God remove this character defects, which means he picks them. Well, he sure is screwing up, and he sure is dilly-dallying. I went snow skiing, and the slopes weren't open yet, so I went to a store, and the lady said, would you watch my store while I go take my son to school? And I thought, wow. I can get those earrings in the bibs. I can get that fur hat into my pockets. I can slip those gloves into my coat. And, you know, my mind was casing out that store really quickly. And then this song came on the radio. And the song was, would you mind my store for me? And I'm thinking, Dad, burn it, God. And so I sat there on my hands until the lady came back, and I had nothing in my pockets. God had lifted stealing. In that very moment, had absolutely lifted it. Now, along with promiscuity, running a close neck and neck is pornography. And so we get to step 6, you know, and I'm thinking, this doesn't damage anybody else. Are you kidding me? What's your beef? What is the beef with this? And then, you know, God is doing this thing where he starts actually talking. And so he said, you know, what do you want? What do you want out of life? And I said, I want to be wanted. And he said, those people on that screen are never going to want you. Never. Bam. It was lifted. Now, what 5 years of celibacy will do for you, will do for a non-virgin, is restore your virginity. And you already know about the little slip up, but it was just, you know. And so I had always thought that God made the rules for him, you know, and that he likes watching us march to his tune, you know. And then it dawned on me, if I don't steal from you, you're going to like me better. You know, if I don't try to go out with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, you'll like me a whole lot better. If I don't kill people, people can sit next to me in the car and they can be around me, you know, when I'm angry. It never dawned on me that these guidelines are for me. They are built for me. character defect that I had not been aware of was a life built on suffering. The poor me syndrome. And as I look back on it, I think I got a lot of that from the church because it was so valued, the flagellation and give up this and don't do this sin and don't do that. And, every time my behavior came in conflict with some church rule, French kissing. It's a sin. Don't do it. And I said, but it's fun, and I would change my yardstick, and pretty soon there wasn't any yardstick there. So I understood that the issue of suffering needed somehow, to it's not a way to build one's identity at all. And the thought of choosing everything that I want to believe in, absolutely different than what I was taught. The restoration for virginity then calls for the perfect relationship, right? And I'm, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years sober, and I'm thinking, it's time to get married. And I made a list of eligible bachelors in Norman, Oklahoma, and 8 of them, and I wrote down what each one of them could do, and I figured out how this thing is going to work. What happens when people get sober, and what happened when I got sober, is I developed a conscience. One of the things that came up in that conscience was the hit-and-run automobile accident. There are numerous advantages of being an attorney. Number 1, you can keep all your drug dealers out of jail. 2, you can do acid before you walk into the courtroom with them. You can drink vodka and not even stink in the courtroom. You can also have cars chopped up and disposed of instantaneously. And that's what I had done with regard to the hit-and-run automobile accident. Woke up in a blackout, a yellow car was sitting there, I don't know how many people, backed up, drove off. Hit-and-run automobile accident with injury, had the car sold and gone within like 2 or 3 hours. So, step 9, and Greta. Now, I told her that I could write a letter to the people that were involved, but I didn't know where they were, so I would just write an anonymous letter to an anonymous person. And Greta said, I don't think so. And she said, what would you do if it was a client? And I said, well, I would hire a private investigator. And so I hired the private investigator that had been working for our office. And he brought back a file, 1/4 inch thick, TMI, way TMI. The amount of damage, the people in the hospital, everything in the file. And I suggested to Greta that I donate a lot of money to the church. And Greta said, I don't think so. She said, you write a letter and you tell them, I'm Judy, I'm an alcoholic. I don't want to drink anymore. In order to not do that, I am the person that wrecked your car and put you in the hospital. I want to make you whole. I want to hear how my behavior affected your life. Critical part of step 9. And I mailed it. And then, waking up in the middle of the night, I was the sole support for my son at that time. And I thought that I would be disbarred. A crime of moral turpitude is a crime of disbarment in Oklahoma. But Greta didn't listen to any of those things. You know, she just narrow-minded, overreactive kind of lady. And the woman from the automobile accident called me a few days. And she said, I don't want anything from you. And I thought, wow, whew, okay. Because that was my focal point. She said, you have given me more than anyone could ever have given me. My grandson has a problem with alcohol and drugs. And if you can get sober and straight and come forward after 10 years, I believe he can also recover. And I sent her a red rose every year on the anniversary of that. The private investigator came in the office one day, and he said, I quit drinking. And I said, well, that's good. Didn't know he had a drinking problem. But then the responsibility shifted, and I thought I should take him to meetings, and, but he only had like 3 or 4, 5 or 6 months sobriety, and sitting next to somebody with that short time of sobriety when I had 8 years of sobriety. And I didn't want them to think I was 13th stepping him. And he was, driving a $400 car that he paid for from his mommy with a hot check, and living at home with his parents. And it was just not acceptable for someone like me. And I told my sponsor all about that, reported him to my sponsor and told her, he's actually very boring. And she said, I've seen the people you've gone out with, and perhaps what you classify as boring is serenity. And perhaps your man picker is broken. I'd like for you to meet Michael, who I have now been married to for 32 years. Because what's the point of this program? Sponsors know best. So I had lied on an insurance claim and gotten more money from the insurance claim than I needed to. And I had also, this is back in the time of libraries, and some of you I'm looking at you, old enough to remember libraries. And they would have reference books, and those are books that are not to be taken out of the library under any conditions. And I would start my briefing on Sunday night. The library closed at 10. I had to have my work turned in on Monday morning, and so I took the books that I needed. When it came time to make amends to the OU Law Library, I suggested to Greta that I give them some money. And Greta said, I don't think so. You bag up those books, and here's what you say. And I said, I know. And I bag up the books, and I take them. And on my way there, I am thinking, I've got a certificate that says you're licensed to practice law in the state of Oklahoma. And I've got another certificate that says you are licensed to practice law in the Supreme Court of the United States. And now I am going to get a third certificate that is going to say, honest lawyer. And that librarian overreacted. She looked at the books. She goes back in the stacks and comes back with this bill that was more money than I could pay right then in one swoop. And she said, the books are useless to us. We had to replace them. Plus interest, she calculated. I went back and complained about her to Greta. My first marriage resulted in a son, and I read somewhere that you do not drink when you're pregnant, but they didn't say anything else about all of those other things I was doing. And the child was born 3 pounds and had to stay 30 days in an ICU unit. And how do you make amends? You know, when I go to the prison, I think, I've never killed anybody. Yet I had an abortion when I was drinking. I've never killed anybody. Yet I have driven drunk millions of times. I've never killed anybody. But that child was born weighing 3 pounds. You hear the thing, living amends. I don't know exactly what that means, frankly. I went to a meeting here in Dallas with him. He's still an earth person and probably is entitled to be. And the speaker didn't show up and the chairman of the meeting didn't show up. And at 12:02, I took care of everything. And on the way out, he puts his arm around me and he says, Mama, I'm so proud of you. Now, I always thought it was going to be something, some nice case that I won. But it was an AA meeting. It was suiting up and showing up and taking action. And that's all it was. There's nothing grander than for our children to be proud of us. One other advantage in practicing law, being an attorney, is when the law sees you weaving on your way home, they drive in front of you and turn their lights on so that you have something to focus on your way home, And it was that dad-burn highway patrolman that was the problem. And he stopped me on the highway. And he ran through his rigmarole tests, and I told him, you are acting like I don't know how to drive after I have had 2 drinks. And I said, you simply put your hands on the steering wheel, one at 10 o'clock, one at 2 o'clock, and you put your thumbs up and you keep that white line in between your thumbs. And he said, ma'am, could you put your hands behind your back? And I reported him to Greta. And I thought at some point in time, it was time to get my attitude toward law enforcement straightened out. So I took Citizens Police Academy. And they put you in a little golf cart, and they put these glasses on you that simulate drunkenness. And guess who had the top score on that? Yes? Thank you very much. I sure did. Uh-huh. Do not ever miss out on step 9. And so back when I was looking for that potential spouse and not seeing what was right in front of me, I thought, it's time to make amends to everybody that I've ever had sex with. And I made this list and I presented it to Greta. And I said, I need to get in touch with these people and make amends, And Greta said, I don't think so. So some things are appropriate and some things are not. The insurance company I called them and I told them, this is the year, this is the amount of money I swindled you out of, and I would like to pay that back. And I said, please hold on for a few minutes. I need you to talk to the manager. And the manager said, I need you to talk to the division head. And the division head said, wait, I need you to talk to the front office. And the front office said, I need you to talk to the vice president. And the vice president said, look, lady, we do not have a category for that in our computers. So I went back to Greta, and I said, Greta, can I donate some money? And Greta said, yes, I think it's appropriate. When I was a medicine aide at Central State Hospital, the local insane asylum, and they let me have keys to the medicine cabinet. And I worked from 11 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning on the criminally insane ward. I'd get there at 11, I'd strap everybody in leathers, and I would do all of their Haldol and Thorazine. If you go back out and use, you do not need to bother with Haldol and Thorazine. Just a word to the wise. So I said to Greta, can I just donate some money to Central State Hospital? And she said, I don't think so, I want you to go to the Central State Hospital meeting on Saturday mornings. And so I went, and I came back and said, okay, I went. And she said, no, you need to go until you hear something. And 2 years later, I came to her, and I said, there was a man in a wheelchair, and he was buttoned crooked, and his teeth were bad, and he was a mess. But you know what? He said, I've been living like a dog, and I don't want to live like a dog any longer. And I so identified with him. And Greta said, you don't have to go to the meetings anymore. And I kept on going. I understand the purpose. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry the message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. As the result, the first time I met somebody that could rattle off the steps, I was impressed. And then I realized, well, if I'm living by the steps, by God, I ought to be able to rattle them off. I have expounded on that first spiritual experience of the diamonds and in the water. And I do it with 20 minutes of quiet time, silence every day, and have been to weird things, like 10 days of silence and meditating from 9 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Just been to some, because Alcoholics Anonymous says we have no monopoly on God. The reason that I am here is to open up my mind to everything else that is to be offered. The goal is emotional sobriety, purpose, and usefulness. Just about when you think that everything that's going to happen has happened to you, and at a certain age, my husband is contacted by a lady on Facebook, and she is his daughter from a prior marriage. So we added our daughter and her wife and their 4 kids. Bam, just like that. Lickety split. All of a sudden, we have a whole nother section of our family. The greatest thing that I can possibly know, we have 5 kids, and 2 of them are in this program. Now that's astounding. I always thought that I had to parent by force, to parent by leadership, to parent by threats. Now I know that I parent by example. If they come in, they come in. When our youngest was maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, she was in the white bathroom with the rouge. Ladies used to use red powdery stuff to put on their cheeks. And she was putting it in the grout lines of the white bathroom. She had been to enough AA meetings that she had heard the phrase, "I am about to tell you," that she said. She saw my facial expression, and she dropped what she was doing and looked up and said, "Mama, is this a big deal?" Ain't no big deals, right? Ain't no big deals. Because I had an abortion when I was drinking, I believe God was punishing me when we got married, and I wanted to have I wanted to have a child with Michael. And we kept having miscarriages. And so my sponsor had me write the unborn child with my right hand, asking for forgiveness, and write myself back with my left hand, forgiving me, and that I would know the sex of the child and the name of the child. And it was a girl, and her name was Amy. And when we kept on having miscarriages, we decided to adopt a child. And we adopted a redheaded, cute, blue-eyed little kid, and that's another advantage of being a lawyer. You can buy a kid for $69 court costs. It turns out that our adopted son is schizoaffect bipolar attachment disorder. And my mother calls him my pathway to heaven. And God bless the child. He's quite challenging. He's sober now, though. And then we got pregnant with our youngest, and I knew, it was said to me, that it was going to be a girl, and I wanted to name her Amelia. So one day I came home from work quite disturbed, and Charles said, "I can fix it, Mom." And I said, "Well, no, it's not. It's in my head. It's not a stomach ache." And he said, "I can fix it. I can fix it. Lay down." And he laid me down on the bed. He lifted up my shirt, and he rubbed baby powder on my belly. And he said, there, Mom, everything is okay." And you gotta wonder, who understands life better, me or him? Having a relationship with another human being, there's pages that are written about alcoholics that marry each other, 2 full pages, And so we're watching a football game, and I'm thinking that I'm going to be sporting because Greta taught me how to properly date my husband, and that is you do what he wants to do. And so when we were at the golf place hitting these white things way out to where you can't see them, I ran to the bathroom and was crying, and I called Greta and I reported to her, this date is hitting golf balls. And she said, "You go with him, you do what he likes to do, and you have a good time doing it." Oh, missed that part. Watching TV, asking very intelligent football questions, right? And I'm asking a question about Jalen Hurt, OU quarterback, and my husband says, "Judy, hush. I want to hear what the announcer has to say." And by George, I hushed. And I hushed during dinner. And I hushed during the rest of the evening, and I hushed when it was time to go to bed. And he said, is there anything wrong with you? Anything wrong? And I said, no. And he said, perhaps you're right. Then again, I said, well, you told me to hush, and I'm hushing. And pretty soon he raises my shirt. That's a common thing in our family. And I think, is this man crazy? Does he think in the middle of a fight that we are going to be intimate? And I said, what do you think you're doing? And I had told him that when he tells me to hush in the middle of a football game, he takes the wind out of my sails. And so he's got my shirt up, and I said, what are you doing? And he says, I'm blowing the wind back in your sails. Our children define him as a fuzzy bunny Democrat, and I'm a serious, straightforward Republican. So you can see desperately why I need, the balance that is involved in that situation. It's okay to hear things from one sponsor, but it's also other people in AA that God speaks through, and much as I hate to admit it, it is our spouses on occasion. I have been going to Al-Anon since 1989, because when we got married, I could not stand it that he wanted to put his toothbrush in the bathroom, and his shoes were in the middle of the floor, and he didn't make the bed when he got out of it in the morning, and he would lay on his belly and clack his heels all night long as I was trying to go to sleep. And so he went to marriage counseling. He said he would go for 3 months, and I loved it. I had an entire group of people to report him to. And I got in the car on Tuesday night to go again, and I said, why are you not in the car? And he said, the 3 months is up. And I reported him to Greta again, and she said, I've heard that there's a program for people who are married to alcoholics. And that's what started Al-Anon. And then eventually, someone pointed out that there's also a program for people who take their yeast, grain, and sugar in physical form, which is donuts and cupcakes and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been going to Overeaters Anonymous. And I have decided to stay out of the casinos. No need to start that popper thing going again, right? If it gets very well developed, I would just have to have another program. I really appreciate being here in Dallas, although the weekend was not what we had initially intended, and I understand that you have also had unusual events recently, losing people. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. God bless you. Thank you.